After the American Revolution in the 18th century and the establishment of the United States, the demand for cheap and effective labor increased. Due to the low numbers of indentured servants and this high demand for labor, Africans through the Atlantic slave trade and the Middle Passage were brought to America. An estimated 12 million Africans were shipped out of their homelands. In the U.S., racialization of blacks was a way to justify slavery and gave rise to racist perspectives. In 1641, slavery became legal and slaves were not considered people, but property that could be owned for life. In the late 18th century, this racial ideology split the delegates in the Constitutional Convention when debating whether slaves should be counted in a state's population. This controversy led to the Three Coast Compromise in 1787, which stated that 3/5 of each individual slave could be counted. This is significant because slavery in the South had been given a political life, and institutionally stated that the value of a black person is less than that of a white person. The story of Sarah Bartman is a prime example of the dehumanization of African American bodies. Her very uncommonly large buttocks and genitals were mocked and over-sexualized by Europeans. Bartman was objectified and put on display for others to look at and poke with a stick. As women were sexualized, black men also faced issues because the idea that a black man was incompetent grew popular during these colonial times. Racism against African American males was often presented in theater. The term blackface emerged in the 19th century when white actors painted their faces in order to resemble African Americans. T.D. Rice, the originator of this, presented blacks as old, crippled, dressed in rags, and dancing in the streets. This degrading stigma was especially popular in the North and West because they were not as familiar with African Americans. All they would know were these stereotypical representations of them. Cartoon caricatures in the 1900s exaggerated black features and were used as a marketing tool by presenting slaves as unintelligent, overgrown children happy to work for the white man. The most popular children's toy, the Gollywag, depicted many of the stereotypically crude features. They were displayed as grotesque creatures that had jet black skin, large white-rimmed eyes, clown lips, and disoriented hair. This persisting image was being reinforced through literature, children's stories, and music, helping perpetrate stereotypes even among the youth. Science was also used to justify racially constricted beliefs. Johann Blumenbach created a science called craniology, which stated that the dimensions of the skull measure intelligence, claiming that African American skulls limited the capacity for reasoning and placed Western European Caucasians at the top of all civilized beings. During the eugenics movement, the pseudoscience of human breeding in a superior race continued to reiterate previous racial ideologies. After the Civil War, even though the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment helped equalize African Americans institutionally at the social and cultural level, racism was still prevalent and people were reluctant to change their system of beliefs about racial hierarchies. Laws, such as the Jim Crow laws, were created in order to segregate based on race. African Americans were still not viewed as complete citizens or people. This social injustice paved the way for the Civil Rights Movement, where African Americans perused their goals to have equal access to opportunities, privileges, and rights of U.S. citizenship through legal means, nonviolent protests, and negotiating. Iconic leaders emerged such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and JFK, which demanded that the flawed social system was changed. The 1954 Supreme Court decision of Brown v. Board of Education outlawed racial segregation in the public school system. This victory met with backlash from the KKK and other white supremacist groups. However, this did not stop the momentum of the movement, and on July 2, 1964, the Civil Rights Act legally ensured all Americans had rights and outlawed segregation in any public facility. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed racial discrimination in voter registration. The Civil Rights Movement united many Americans to come together to fight for the full citizenship of African Americans. As a result of the increasing popularity of television during the 20th century, African Americans were targeted by this new form of media and depicted as criminals. The difference in representation of an African American versus Caucasian in the media became clear and still exists in the contemporary period. Oftentimes, people do not realize that the matrix of domination, privilege, and social construct we are born into influences our decisions and point of views. Studies have shown that police officers automatically see black males as the biggest criminal threat. Racial profiling like this occurs every day to African American citizens. Some prime examples include the incidents such as shootings of John Crawford, Trayvon Martin, and Michael Brown, who were unarmed when they were killed. The political and criminal justice system does not treat the African American individual equal to their Caucasian counterpart. As African American males are criminalized, the females are hypersexualized throughout media. The stereotype of the provocative African American female demonstrates a historical root back to the time of Sarah Parker. The exaggerated curvaceous bodies presented are viewed as more exotic than a Caucasian individual's body. Although negative stereotypes created a heavy burden, the African American community continues to be a strong and united one, consisting of many powerful and influential role models. However, racism is still socially practiced, and stereotypes rooting from colonial times still hold true in the contemporary period. The only way to break this cycle of continued racism is to rise above it, educate others, and challenge the current social system.